I actually live in Fort Collins now, Fort Collins, Colorado. I graduated from UC Davis, been a number of years ago. Jim, it was coming up on 30 years ago. So when I came in this morning, I had to pull out a map so I could find my way around campus. It's changed so much. But I'm going to kind of give you my perspective as a feed yard nutritionist. And I think my role in this whole thing is all the smart people out there are going to come up with solutions. It's going to be my responsibility to figure out a way to implement and execute some of those technologies. So that's going to be my take on it, and I'll walk through it. Just to give you an idea, and this is similar to a slide that Frank had, my role in the industry is down here in the feed yards. Those cattle, we produce the calves, those calves go out on grass. After they go out on grass, they come into a feed yard anywhere from maybe 150 to 300 days. And after their time in the feed yard, when they're ready, when we think that they've achieved whatever quality that we're looking for, those cattle then go to a packing plant for harvest, and the meat goes on to the retailers. My entire role is spent down here in the feed yards. I thought I'd put a little map up here. Those little dots or flags, that's where my clients are. We've got about 11.8 million head of cattle on feed at any one time in the United States. I oversee it just right at about 1 million of those cattle. And if you see down in the bottom left corner, about 1 million here in the U.S. If you look down the bottom left corner in California, we don't think of California as being a cattle feeding state. We think of it as almonds and lettuce and a dairy state. But in fact, California is the number 6 largest cattle feeding state in the United States. We got about 550,000 head of cattle on feed. The vast majority of those are in Imperial Valley, east of San Diego, right on the Mexican border. And then I also cover Texas and Kansas and Colorado, Nebraska. So I need to get to where I can see the slides. So as I mentioned, we got about 11.8 million head of cattle on feed right now. The cattle on feed, those numbers are dropping, and primarily because of reduced cow herd size. You can see what the slaughter numbers have done and what they're projected to do over the next couple of years. The number of cattle on feed are going down. It's just a fact. Now, one of the things I would like to mention is, and I think Frank brought this up, the number of cattle that are coming off the dairies, they've started breeding these. Oh, that'd be great. Does this work? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we fed a lot of Holstein steers. We've got 9.2 million dairy cows in the United States. Half of those cows are having bull calves every year, or at least until the sex semen thing came out. We were feeding all those Holstein steers. About, I'd say 5 years ago, it really became a thing to breed those Holstein cows to Angus. So the dairymen would breed their cows for replacement heifers using sex semen, so they would get the heifer replacements, and then 2/3 of the cows would be bred to Angus. These Angus beef on dairy cattle are becoming a greater and greater percentage of the cattle on feed. So traditionally, we would think about 12 to 14% of all the beef supply in the United States would be coming from dairy-type genetics. As the beef cow herd declines, and we're seeing more of these beef on dairy cattle, we're going to exceed 20% of the cattle on feed, or at least the beef supply, coming from these beef on dairy genetics. Why is that important in this talk? It's because, number one, these cattle are coming from the dairy to a calf ranch, from the calf ranch right into a feed yard. They never go out on grass. So we're reducing the methanogenesis that's happening out on pasture. Also, their mothers never go out on grass. And so from a methane production standpoint, you're really having a pretty big impact on the total methane production in the life cycle of these cattle. I just showed this, I took this picture last week in Texas. Those are calves that just came in. These are what those cattle are going to look like 300 days later. It's amazing what we've done with these genetics. By the way, I always have to throw a slide of corn. The cattle that we feed in the United States, it's basically a corn-based diet. All of the corn that's being fed is coming from the Corn Belt. That's Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Nebraska. Even down here in Imperial Valley, California, all of that corn is coming on a train, brought in. We're unloading it. In order to increase the absorbability and digestibility, we steam flake that corn. The corn is steam flaked, it's incorporated into the ration, and then we combine it with all the other ingredients to make a total mixed ration that's fed to the cattle. So, and this is in my simple mind, how are we going to reduce methane emissions? Well, we either reduce methanogenesis, either through feed, rations, and so on, or through some type of feed additives, and we'll go through a couple of those in a few minutes. And then, obviously, genetic selection, as we've heard a couple of times. And then also reducing the greenhouse gas intensity. That is, can we keep the methane production total equal, but produce more product with that? This is a great example of what we've done in the industry. And with all due respect, Dr. Rowan, wherever you are, you're saying it's due to genetics. It's my job to say it's due to excellent nutrition consulting, okay? I think I'm losing the battle in that argument, but over time, over the last 25 or 30 years, basically we're increasing hot carcass weight by 5 to 6 pounds per head per year. And you can see the dramatic increase in carcass weight that we're producing from every animal. It's due to a lot of reasons. Genetics, obviously. I think we're doing a better job feeding the cattle. We have feed additives now that are much more effective and having a bigger impact on the growth. This is a slide here that kind of shows that. If you look at that red line, this is similar to a slide that Dr. Mitloner showed. That red line is the total cow inventory in the United States. And look how that cow inventory has declined over the years. We have really come off our peak, and it continues to go down. And yet, the beef production, the meat that we're actually selling to the consumer, is held steady or actually increased over that period of time. And so, from a resources standpoint, we are much, much more effective at producing beef. And then we get into some of the technologies that we can feed, like feed additives. Most of the cattle, probably 90-95% of the cattle that we feed in the United States are given growth-promoting hormones. These growth-promoting hormones are exceptional at improving the performance of the cattle, the efficiency with which they grow. I pulled these numbers off of a Texas Tech implant database, and you can see with just one Revlar 200 implant, we improve the feed to gain. That is, it takes 12% less feed to produce the same pounds of meat using that one growth-promoting implant. It's tremendous technology. We've been using it since the 1950s. So the vast majority of cattle are given an implant. That's an implant, a steroid implant that goes in behind the ear, slowly pays out product over usually 80 to 200 days. And again, the vast majority of the cattle that we're feeding in the United States are given these implants. In fact, what I'm seeing in my business here is the number of cattle that are devoted to what we'll call a natural type program or a non-hormone treated cattle, NHTC program, is going down. We're not seeing nearly as many cattle going into those programs, I think primarily because the product's more expensive and consumers are getting, with inflation and everything like that, we're hitting a threshold on what consumers are willing to pay. By the way, is this new technology? No. In 1956, Synovex S was improved. That was almost 70 years ago, and we are still using that implant today. So we've been using these growth-promoting implants for almost 70 years now. Now, as you go down to 1991, they came out with these new implants, the combination TBA E2 implants, tremendously effective. And then we get into 2003, where the beta agonist type products became approved, starting out with ractopamine. Elanco came out with a product called Optiflex, the ractopamine hydrochloride. In 2006, Zilpaterol. Zilpaterol is fed for a number of years. It's no longer on the market in the United States. It's still fed in Mexico and South Africa. But in 2022, Elanco came out with Lobubagron, and I am sure Dr. Place talked about this yesterday a little bit. The product is called Experior. Phenomenal product, and we're using it throughout the industry. When I use a product, though, I have to look at the label. How am I going to use this product? If you look at this label, Nowhere on this label does it say, feed this product to improve the performance of the animals. What it says on the label right there is, you feed the product to reduce ammonia gas emissions per pound of live weight or hot carcass weight in beef steers and heifers from the last 14 to 91 days. It doesn't talk about performance of the animals. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that a product was specifically identified for the purpose. We call it a green label. It is to try and support greenhouse gases or some type of sustainability label. Now, what does that mean for me? Well, I can't feed that product to improve performance. This is why I can feed the product. Why do we actually feed the product? For performance. I'll get into that in just a minute. So, some of the feed additives that are out there, and there's going to be more coming. Here's one. Elanco and DSM have an agreement to sell Bovaer. Bovaer reduces, and we saw a slide on that earlier. Bovaer is going to reduce methane production. Now, the question is, if I'm going to feed that product, what is it going to do to performance? Okay? That's one additive that's coming down the pipeline. Another one that I'm kind of excited about, and I've started using, it's a tannins type product. There's tannins, they're being harvested from trees. We include it into the diet. There's data out there showing that as you increase the tannins inclusion in the diet, you reduce methane production. But at the same time, you also see performance adjustments or increases in performance. Makes it a little bit of an easier sell when you go to a customer, when you're not only going to reduce methane, but you're actually going to get something back from it. So as a nutritionist, if you come up with these technologies, say, okay, John, we've got these good technologies, how are we going to get it to the cattle? Then it's my job to try and implement or execute those technologies. In the feed yard, we may have a smaller impact on reducing methane production than if we were out in the grazing cow, but we've got a lot of cattle on feed, and it's easy to implement because we can get those products into the animals pretty easily, right? We can either put it in through a supplement or go through a micro machine. The vast majority of feed yards out here are equipped with these micro machines where we're adding the very, very small inclusion rate items, the drugs or the vitamins or so on. I can tailor each ration to hit a prescribed target for each animal using the micro machines. It's a tremendous technology, and as we move forward and you come up with these new technologies, we'll be able to add them easily to the diet, okay? So I was asked last week, somebody on the phone call said, well, John, if there's technology out there, why wouldn't your customers or your clients embrace it? Why wouldn't they use it? I turned around and said, well, if you came up with these technologies, why would they embrace it? Okay? Because you have to think about it from our perspective. What is the incentive for us to include the technologies or pursue a reduction in methane production? And in my mind, it's either going to be regulatory or it's got to be some type of financial incentive. Regulatory being kind of negative, financial one, hopefully it's a positive. And by the way, I showed that slide of the United States with where my clients are. Outside of California, guess how many times I've been asked, let's say over the last year, guess how many times I've been asked about methane production and what we're going to do about it? 0. Okay? We've got a lot of work to do in that avenue, all right? So on the financial side, I want to go through just a real quick example, and this happened yesterday. I was down in Southern California. There's a product out there to control flies, okay? It costs a nickel or 5.5 cents per head per day to reduce flies. How many people think 5.5 cents per head per day would be too much to pay to reduce flies in the feed yard? 5.5 cents is nothing. For this feed yard I was at, 5.5 cents per head per day is $8,000 a day, $250,000 a month. Over 4 months of fly season, he's going to pay $1 million to reduce flies. What question is he going to ask me? What's the payback? Okay? How do we justify it? And in my mind, when I add a product, it's got to be at least a 2-to-1 return on investment. If I pay $1, I need to get at least $2 back. Okay? So how do I show him that he's going to get $2 million back by reducing the fly population? My gut is telling me it's probably there. You know, you look at 150,000 head of cattle, you cut down on the flies, you're probably going to save performance in those cattle. There is no data to show that you're going to reduce the fly population enough to impact performance. Okay? The same thing with these technologies. If you come to me and say, John, we need to include that to reduce methane production, my first question is going to be, show me the data that I can convince somebody that you're going to have at least a 2-to-1 return on investment. That's how we think about things in the industry. So, I know that was quick. I'm looking forward to the panel. If anybody has questions for me, I'd be happy to address it.